Today is, of course, the Washington, D.C. March for Life. And this is where hundreds of thousands of pro-lifers are descended on Washington, D.C. today. And they will be addressing, of course, the nation and all kinds of speakers and all of that. Well, anyway, it's going to be interesting to see how the media covers this. I want to remind everybody, those of you that deny that there's a liberal left-wing media bias, the March for Women that were a bunch of pro-abortion feminists and anti-Trumpers and whatever from last Saturday, all right, they were in Washington, D.C., and ABC, NBC, and CBS, in only their news programs, NBC News, ABC News, just their news programs, devoted 1 hour, 15 minutes, and 18 seconds to that. Over 75 minutes, over 1.25 hours devoted to that rally. Whereas last year, for the 2016 March for Life, where you also have hundreds of thousands of people in Washington, D.C., ABC, NBC, and CBS combined devoted 35 seconds. 129 to 1 ratio. So now what you have this year is you have a lot of people, a lot of conservative media, basically making a big issue of this, calling the media on the carpet and saying, you have a responsibility to honestly report what's happening in the news. And by the way, can I say, Donald Trump, in conducting his interview with ABC, and he sat down with David Muir of ABC News the other night, and in that interview, you know, part of it's they're sitting down, part of it is they're walking along the sidewalk of the White House as they're talking with each other. And did you see the exchange that they had when David Muir asked Donald Trump about the big feminist women's march? He asked him, you know, could you hear them from the White House? He said, could you hear the voices of the women's march here in Washington? Donald Trump said, no, I couldn't hear them. The crowds were large. But listen what Donald Trump then said. He turned it around and said, but you will have a large crowd on Friday, too. Now, in other words, he says to ABC News, when ABC News is trying to put Donald Trump on the defensive and saying, hey, did you hear all of those women out there last Saturday? Could you hear them from here at the White House, you know, as they were protesting you and whatever? Donald Trump turns it around and says, no, I didn't hear them. But hey, ABC, are you aware of the fact there's going to be a big crowd on Friday? He's talking about the Right to Life, the March for Life rally. He said, quote, you'll have a large crowd on Friday, too, which is mostly pro-life people. You're going to have a lot of people coming on Friday, pro-life people, and they say the press doesn't cover them. I mean, so Donald Trump looks ABC in the eye and says, hey, the press isn't covering the March for Life. So David Muir tries to weasel out of that, and he goes, I don't want to compare crowd sizes. And then Trump interrupts him and says, no, you should, but let me just tell you, what they say is that the press doesn't cover them. And David Muir had no response. He couldn't say anything. He just then went on to, well, we saw marches around the country, and you're their president now. Do you sense the responsibility to reach out now to the... Just wouldn't even address it. And then Donald Trump just, you know, he let it go finally. But 2 times he threw it in his face. I love it. And by the way, ABC News at abcnews.com, they have a transcript of the entire interview with David Muir and Donald Trump. Guess what ABC News censored, edited out, and left out of the transcript? This exchange between Donald Trump and David Muir about ABC and the media not covering the March for Life rally. abcnews.com just decided to censor that and not put that as part of the transcript. Wow. Oh, but don't forget, folks, your liberal friends are right when they tell you there's not a liberal left-wing bias. Oh, my goodness. Well, anyway, this March for Life. Now, at this point, CNN is reporting it doesn't look like Donald Trump is going to be addressing the crowd by telephone. There was some speculation that he might address them by telephone. At this point, the latest reports are that he's not planning on doing that. Now, you might think, well, hey, isn't that a snub on them because George Bush addressed them by telephone? I don't think Bush did it every year. And my guess is that Donald Trump will do it some years. But I was thinking about this a little bit because I thought, well, I would prefer Donald Trump address them by phone, at least, so his voice can go live over the speakers to the crowd there. But then I also think to myself, well, okay, Trump is doing something that no other previous administration has done. He has more high-ranking people from the administration itself actually physically there at the rally on the stage than any president in history. No president, Republican president, obviously Democrat presidents just ignore this rally, but Republican presidents, they haven't had their own administration, high-ranking administration officials actually on the stage participating in the rally. Here, Donald Trump has Kellyanne Conway, who is his senior advisor. That's the highest-ranking administration position ever to actually physically participate in the march from the stage as a speaker. But he went higher than that. He's now got Mike Pence, the vice president, who's going to be at the rally, participating in the rally. I think he may have already, speaking on the stage to the crowd. No vice president in history has ever done that. No senior advisor to the White House has ever done that. And here you have the senior advisor and the vice president that aren't just sending a message that's being read, they're actually there on the stage participating in the rally, addressing the audience as speakers. So it's like, well, okay, it would be nice if Donald Trump talked to them directly because George Bush did, but George Bush didn't send Dick Cheney to talk there directly to them. He didn't send his senior advisor to talk there directly to them. So it's a little bit of a balancing act, I suppose. Plus, Trump is probably being a little bit smart here because he's leaving himself some room for the future. In other words, whatever he does this year, there's going to be kind of an expectation that he has to at least match that, if not do more, the following year. And so this year, if he has his vice president and his senior advisor, and he addresses the crowd directly, then he's pretty much set a precedent where anything less than that in future years is going to be looked at like, oh, he's reducing his support for the pro-life cause. So my best guess is, folks, that he sat around with his people and strategically planned and said, look, let's do more. Let's show more love to the March for Life rally than any Republican president before me has. But let's not show 100% full love, so we've got nowhere to go but down. So there's probably some wisdom in that. So I'm okay with Trump not addressing them directly by telephone. I don't think I'd be okay if it weren't for the fact that he's sending Kellyanne Conway and the fact that he's sending Mike Pence. Wow, that's a big deal, folks. No vice president's ever done that before. So I think we got to give Trump credit for that. All right, what about this whole